Hi, Paris Thalheimer here. Today I'm going to talk about the American Standard Stratocaster. Now, I'm not talking about the current production model Stratocaster. I'm talking about the guitar that I would consider saved Fender. So, in 1983, 84, I think it was 84, CBS had pretty much had it with making guitars. Fender quality had gone down, and CBS felt like they should get off the ship. So, in 1984, Bill Schultz, employees at Fender, and private investors all purchased Fender guitars. But they didn't have a factory. They got a name and they got some parts and probably some machines, but they didn't have a place to build guitars. So for a while there, you couldn't get an American-made Fender guitar unless it was leftover parts. But by 1987, they relaunched the Stratocaster in the American Standard. Now, this is my friend's 1992 American Standard, and it is a good example of the guitars that were made prior to 1996, because in 1996, Fender made some more changes. Now, I'm going to say from the start two things, kind of my disclaimer. One, I am not a paid expert. I'm a guy who reads a lot and has held a lot of these guitars, and I've done a lot of investigation on the subject. So if I get something wrong, or don't crucify me for being human. But another thing I want to say, this guitar has been modified. It has a different nut. It has a trem setting device back here. It also has Fender Texas Special pickups, which are not stock for this guitar at the time period. Beyond that, as far as I know, the guitar is pretty much the way it came when he bought it. So let's get started. First thing to notice is the headstock went to a smaller headstock with the silver transition logo in Fender. The serial number would be on the front of the headstock. It would be an E or an N. And remember, E4 doesn't necessarily mean 84. E4 means E4 and some number digits, but it was probably made in 87 if it's an American Standard. Remember, serial numbers are not written in stone solid fact of a date. Only way to really find out when a guitar was made is to take it apart. Next thing is, it would have two string trees, Fender tuning keys, and something that many buyers, for some reason, miss. I see a lot of these questions come up. Is this a real Fender Stratocaster or an American Standard? And 9 times out of 10, I'm seeing a black kind of plug hole for the truss rod, like it's black plastic, or it's blackened, or it's not there at all. If it is an American Standard Stratocaster, or an American-made Stratocaster, or a Telecaster, it will have this walnut kind of opening. This is where the truss rod is adjusted, and it will be walnut. It will be nothing else but walnut. Everyone say it with me. It will only be walnut, because it goes along with this walnut skunk stripe on the back. That is a dead giveaway of an American-made Stratocaster. Some other things that happened. Fender went to a 2-point bridge with a 2-piece block and plate. Remember, in the 70s, it was all one piece. They also went to these this type of saddle. And what that is these saddles are powdered metal that are put into a mold, put under intense pressure, and it comes out as one piece. Voila, saddle. And they work pretty good. The bridge block will look just like this. It'll have 3 to 5 springs. The neck plate will say Fender in diagonal like this. It will have this style of strap button. The contours will be something like this. Now, these contours are pretty close to the Fender contours of or let me rephrase this. They're closer to the Fender contours of the 50s and 60s, but they're still a little flatter. So I've seen some that look really flat and almost not American Standard Stratocaster shape. They are, but quality control is what it is. It will be white parts, white pickguard, maple rosewood fretboard, creamy dots for rosewood and black dots for maple. Finishes. In the 70s, a lot of Fender finishes were pretty bland. Black, blonde, sunburst, white, wine I think was a color, mocha brown. Yeah, pretty boring, natural. Well, by the 80s and 90s, Fender had come out with some much better colors for their guitars. I usually think of the cars of that time period. If you look at a lot of the cars from the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of them were like really electric blue and turquoise green and these really crazy, brilliant colors. Well, Fender put them on their guitars. Now let's talk bodywood. In the 70s, Fender was using ash. By the 80s, they were they were making bodies of alder again. But by around 91 or 92, alder had become difficult to acquire. So what Fender did was they started using poplar. So poplar is a pretty decent wood. A lot of people like it. Some people don't. I don't. It sounds good to me. This body is poplar, but it has a veneer of, I want to say, maple, possibly alder. It looks more like maple to me. Anyway, so it's three pieces. So it's a poplar body with a sandwich between a maple back and a maple top. And to hide the seams where this wood would meet, Fender did this to the sunburst. Looks kind of wonky to me. That's the way they did it. Up until right around 93 when alder could be acquired again. By 93, Fender went back to their traditional sunburst, which would come up to here. And all was good with the world. Alder is a great wood for making Stratocasters. Now, in 1996, Fender made some new changes. It was an anniversary year, I believe, and so it was time to do something new. So what they did was they still kept this arrangement with the two string trees and the small headstock, walnut plug, but they went back to the spaghetti logo, which would be underneath the clear coat, still two string trees, and the serial number would go on the back like this, which is where we find it today. This is my 2000/2001 Eric Clapton Stratocaster in candy green. One of my favorite guitars. Another thing Fender did was they changed the neck plate to this Fender Corona California neck plate. The American Standard would have a micro tilt neck, which is this indicated by this hole right here. And that's about everything for the exterior. So stop this video and then go and watch the second part of this, which talks about the interior of the guitar, which in many ways is even more fascinating.